This episode is a request by one of our listeners who recently sent me a note asking for an episode on resolving conflict with an avoidant partner. They had just listened to the avoidant attachment style episode and wanted a follow-up. So thank you very much for that person that sent me that note. I'm not going to reveal their name or anything just because confidentiality is sort of my default given the business I'm in. But I do appreciate the feedback and was happy to create an episode on this. This is actually a really good request for two reasons, I think. First, the avoidant attachment style, it is the most listened to episode on my podcast channel. So I think the listener is tapping into something that many people are thinking and feeling and wanting more information on. And the second, I think, is that there's a chance to get more granular here about how do we resolve conflict when one partner has a tendency to shut down, which can be quite frustrating. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to resolve conflict with an avoidant partner. Welcome to Trauma-Free Relationship. I'm Tom Philp, your host. And as a therapist, I've spent over 10,000 hours helping couples work through their traumas so they can repair ruptures, heal their wounds, and communicate from a place of wholeness and connection. Let's get started. Okay, as I mentioned at the outset of the episode, what we're going to talk about today is how to resolve conflict with an avoidant partner. And I'm going to make an assumption here. I'm going to make the assumption that if you're listening to this, also the assumption that the person requesting this episode has more of an anxious attachment style. First of all, I think if you're an avoidant and you're listening to this, then you're probably not wanting to figure out how to engage or resolve conflict with your avoidant partner if you're also leaning towards that same coping style. Why? Because two avoidants together, usually there's not a lot of conflict between the two partners. Usually there's not a lot of talking because neither one wants to rock the boat. Neither partner wants to bring things up that are emotional or difficult to discuss in the relationship. So my assumption is that the person that requested this podcast, as well as most of the listeners that are interested in this one, are going to be from a more anxious attachment style. And that's perfectly understandable because oftentimes the conflict comes and the cycles are created around our coping styles that are different in our relationships. And a very, very common one, matter of fact, the most common one, is when you have one partner that's more avoidant and the other that is more anxious. So I'm making that assumption up front. Now, again, my assumption is that we have cycles that we fall into when one partner is more anxious and the other partner is more avoidant. And so today we're going to talk about things a little bit from the perspective of what happens if you're more of an anxious style. What do you need to actually do to help your more avoidant partner stay engaged in the conversation and not shut down and not turn off emotionally and not just try to intellectualize the problem and not move away or not minimize your feelings and concerns and do all the things that more avoidant style partners do. So we're going to discuss that. But I want to say from the outset, there's an assumption here, and the assumption is if you're listening to this and you're interested in this particular episode, I'm assuming you're probably coming from more of an anxious style. So let's do a brief review of the avoidant conflict style. And the first thing I want to say is the avoidant style shows up when it's activated by a real or perceived threat to the relationship. That's true of the anxious style as well. Our coping styles, again, are more anxious or avoidant or sometimes disorganized. styles really only show up when there's disconnection in the relationship, when there is a real or perceived threat to the relationship or to one of the other partners. I'm not talking physical threat here. That's a whole different episode. I'm talking about an emotional threat, a threat to the relationship. Like, okay, we're disconnected. Now we're upset with each other. Communication is breaking down. That kind of an emotional threat. So when partners overwhelm with words or emotions, or partners send signals that they're not getting it right, partners won't give you space to think and to process. Those are perceived threats to what it is that holds you together. And so you go into your protection. And that's when protection shows up in the relationship. So the avoidance style, it isn't there all the time. It's not like your partner is 100% emotionally unavailable to you. There may be times where they are. But once a rupture happens, once there's some type of disconnection, that's when you might see this partner move into their protection. Also, the avoidant attachment is usually born from rejecting need for closeness and affection, unavailable parents or caretakers, or abandoning partners from the past. So this often is what is created the whole avoidant attachment style. Usually it's in our family of origin, but it certainly can be born out of a little bit later relationships. Maybe your parents divorced at 8 or 10, and you found yourself in an abandonment situation. That can still very much create that type of style. One of the things we know about trauma, whether it results in a more avoidant or more anxious style, it is not simply what happens to you that creates that type of reaction. It is that you are left alone, and it is the aloneness of in the face of overwhelming feelings that actually creates a style. There's nobody there to be able to pick up and help you process those overwhelming emotions, to put them into context, to help bear those emotions with you. And so it is not just the event, it is also very much the aloneness in the face of those overwhelming feelings that in part creates the more avoidant or anxious style. So certainly, a lack of affection, emotional unavailability of parents or abandoning parents is part of what creates the avoidant attachment style. One other thing, avoidant attachment is characterized by low anxiety about your relationship and high avoidance, meaning when they get triggered, they deactivate their attachment needs, and they rely on self-soothing and avoid or downplay closeness and connection with others. So low anxiety, high relationship. Part of the way they deal with the anxiety they're feeling is they try to disconnect from it. And so the more avoidant attachment style either goes to their head and tries to intellectualize things, because that then moves them away from the anxious feelings they're having, or they tend to sort of disconnect completely. They might leave the room. They might, again, I've said this before, if they feel like they cannot escape, because they are thrown into fight or flight, right? The anxious style person, they move out of the window of tolerance and are thrown into fight or flight. It's just that their anxiety maximizes to, times 10, and their whole style of dealing with that is to push for connection. Well, the avoidance is just the opposite, but they're still in fight or flight. They don't always hypoactivate, meaning that they freeze. They can still go into fight or flight, but the way they deal with that is to disconnect. So on the outside of an avoidant partner, it may look like they don't care. It may look like they are unbothered by what's going on. They may try to downplay, and all of that is because they've learned to use these tools to help distance themselves from the anxiety they're feeling. So low anxiety, high avoidance for the avoidant attachment style. And as I said before, it results in things like shutting down, withdrawing, emotionally cutting off, not knowing what to say, disassociating, or getting angry if pushed too far. If they cannot escape and they feel pushed into a corner, then they might explode with rage, because that is the only way now that they are left with trying to figure out how to stop what is happening. And so oftentimes we see people that are more avoidant have an anger component to them, because if they cannot escape, remember, if they're thrown into fight or flight, their whole role is to flight, is to get out of there, disconnect, leave, do whatever you need to do to stop this perceived threat to themselves and the relationship. If they can't do that, then they will explode with anger or rage. They may say really mean and cruel things. They may attack the partner's character, whatever it takes to be able to resolve and get away from the anxiety that they're feeling. So that's just a quick review of the avoidant attachment style itself. Now let's talk about, okay, how do we resolve conflict with an avoidant person? Well, the first thing I want to say, and this is 3 parts to this, but it's very easy to memorize: safety, safety, safety. Let me say that again. Safety, safety, safety. If you can't make it safe for the avoidant partner to stay engaged in the relationship, in the conversation, then they're going to resort to their attachment style, which is avoidant. They're going to go to their head and try to solve the problem. They're not going to be able to stay in their heart. They're not going to be able to lead with their feelings or use their feelings to guide their own wants and needs during that period of conflict. They are going to retreat in any way that they can. So safety, safety, safety is the first 3 things, if we want to list them out by numbers, so to speak, that you have to do in order to be able to resolve conflict with an avoidant partner. The second thing I would say is, before even coming to your partner to discuss something, because it is more likely that as an anxious-styled attachment style partner, you are the one bringing things up most often. Avoidants don't bring things up. Avoidants they don't want to talk about emotional issues. So they're less likely, I'm not going to say never, but they're less likely to initiate those conversations. So if you're the more anxious style and you're trying to bring something up, then the first thing I would really consider you do is to self-soothe. Make sure that you get yourself in a place where you are trying to manage your anxiety better. So that could be some deep breathing. It could be reminding yourself that your partner loves you, cares about you, and actually wants to resolve the conflict, but it's just their coping style that is overwhelming them and causing them to be distant from you at times. So whatever it is, wherever you have to go in order to self-soothe, that's an important first step, because that's going to help create safety for your partner. They're not going to feel like you're coming in like a freight train wanting to discuss something with them. And that is an image that I think is really called for, because oftentimes for the avoidant partner, that is what it feels like. It feels like they're tied to the tracks and they have a freight train barreling down on them, and they are tied there and they've got no way to escape. And so all of this anxiety is coming at them. The more you can slow that train down, the more you can help untie them from the tracks, the more they're going to feel safe to be able to stand there and be engaged and give you part of what you need, which is that emotional engagement in that conversation. So being able to self-soothe is part of how you create safety, safety, safety for the partner. Another thing that you might do is you might platform your concern, meaning you would come into the conversation and you might even start by telling them, this is not about criticism. I'm not blaming you, but I want to share some feelings with you, and I really want you just to be able to hear my feelings. And so I'm not blaming you. I'm not saying that you're at fault here. So what you're doing is you're platforming your concerns. You're addressing right away that place where you think they go to every single time. I'm not saying you're not good enough. I'm not saying any of those things. I really want you to just hear my heart here and just try to hear my feelings. Can you stay engaged long enough just to hear my feelings? And so you're just asking for what you need up front, and you're addressing those issues that they know that you know they might go, their sort of default, if you will, places they go to when you begin to address those concerns. So just platform, put it out there in a sense that, hey, this is not about criticism. I'm not saying you're not good enough. I'm not saying that you don't measure up. That's not at all the way I feel about you. I love you, but I've got a couple of things I want to discuss with you. Can we just sit and talk? And I want to share my feelings. That is another way to create safety for your partner to help them be able to stay engaged. Another thing you can do is tell them what they do right in the relationship. I love the way you cuddle me at night. It always makes me feel so safe. You know how to calm me down when I'm upset. Nobody can reach me like that. You're one of these few people that can make me laugh in those moments, and it's always just so relieving to me. Or I love how you fulfill my love language of acts of services. You're always fixing things around the house. It's so impressive how you're not afraid to tackle anything from plumbing to electrical issues. It's just, you're amazing like that. So let them know some of the things they do right. Let them know, I had so much fun on our date night the other night when we were at the table talking, and we were just so engaged with each other, and you were just so there for me in that moment, and I really appreciate that. I could really just feel your presence. Let them know how they do things right in the relationship. Another idea is give them space if they need it, but ask them for a time when they can come back together. So this is something I see a lot with couples, especially when one is anxious and one is more avoidant, is they want to give their partner space. They've learned to do that, but then they feel like their partner never comes back and readdresses the issue. So there never feels like there's ever any resolution to what they're trying to discuss. So be able to give your partner space, that's fine, but then ask, when can you come back and address this? 30 minutes? Later tonight after the kids go to bed? Tomorrow afternoon over a lunch date? When can we address this again? So being able to pinpoint a time is going to be helpful to you as the more anxious partner, and it also means that they don't just get to go away and never readdress the issue. But being able to allow them space is going to be able to help. Give them small bits of information at a time. Don't overwhelm them. If I see this a lot with couples, especially the more anxious partner, they have difficulty sometimes, the more anxious partner, staying focused about what they're trying to address. And so what they do is they get more anxious because they feel like their partner's trying to avoid the conversation, and then all of a sudden they throw everything from the past into the conversation as well. And that completely overwhelms your partner. So being laser focused about what it is you want to discuss and staying on topic will really help your partner. If you ask them a question and you truly want an answer, then stop talking and let them answer. Even if they're not sure how to answer, even if they can't come up with some of the feelings right away, give them the space to be able to answer the question. Because what I see a lot too is sometimes the more anxious partner will throw question after question after question, and the avoidant partner who's starting to go to their head and intellectualize things can't even answer one question before the anxious partner has moved on to the next one. And so at that point, they're so confused, they're so overwhelmed, none of this is making sense to them anymore. And they get so lost in their overwhelmness, they get so lost in the weeds that they've lost track of what the initial topic even was. So give them small bits of information at a time, one problem or issue at a time, so that they don't get overwhelmed. And then finally, make a goal for the conversation. What is it you're trying to accomplish in this conversation? Don't bring the past into it. Stay current. Stay in the here and now. When you do this, I feel, and it makes me feel this way. When you pull away, it makes me feel like my feelings aren't important and that you don't want to, I'm not worth engaging with. And that makes me feel alone in this relationship. And then draw on your need. I would love it if you would be able to listen to my feelings more and not think that they're always about you or take them always so personally, but rather that this is just an experience I'm having in this relationship and that it's okay for me to have them. I need more validation that it's okay for me to have my feelings, because oftentimes I'm left feeling like I'm way too much. And so being able to draw on your needs by being able to talk about your feelings with the avoidant partner and ask for what you need, that's very focused and that's very goal-driven in the conversation. And so the last thing I would say is, in line with keeping safety, is go low and slow. Drop your voice a little bit and slow down your words. That's really going to be able to help your partner digest and not be overwhelmed and feel more safe in order for them to stay engaged in the conversation. So low and slow. Take your voice down a notch, kind of like what I'm doing right here. You don't want to like whisper completely, but being able to, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about. Can we carve out a few minutes tonight? There's something I'd love to be able to address with you, just some things I've been feeling. Would that be okay? And so you're just going slow and you're dropping your voice a little bit lower. And so it's helping them not feel so overwhelmed. Hey, I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope this was helpful today. Thank you for the request. Please keep them coming. I love it. It's helpful to me to hear and get feedback from you all about things that are really important to you, things that you might want to hear about in this podcast. And so, again, I really just appreciate you all listening. We're going to keep bringing more of these episodes to you week after week so that we can really make an impact on your life. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Trauma-Free Relationship, a podcast for the healing of attachment trauma. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website at traumafreerelationship.com. Be sure to look for our next episode on your favorite streaming service.